What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video. Today we are going over the fallers from the NHL offseason. These are players that I believe have lost value in fantasy hockey, whether it be due to them joining a new team and being in an unfavorable situation, or other players joining their current team, causing them to lose deployment. We have a lot of players to talk about, so let's get right into it. Before we start, guys, I just want to say if you want up-to-date information on fantasy hockey, follow my X/Twitter at FIREDUP Fantasy, and we also have a Discord community that I'm trying to grow. The link is in the description. I'm going to be active there chatting with you guys. So yeah, if you guys want to do that, feel free. All right, now let's talk about the players that I think were effective negatively in fantasy hockey this offseason, starting with Luke Evangelista of the Nashville Predators. This was a guy that I was high on back in April when I made that breakout video, but with the signings of Marchessault and Stamkos, this has pushed Evangelista out of the top six, and it's also pushed him out of the potential opportunity on the first line power play. So he's going to be a third line guy on the second power play unit. He's not going to be fantasy relevant. It is what it is, but yeah, don't go ahead drafting Luke Evangelista. I will be making a new breakout video talking about some of my opinions that have changed since I made that video in April, so stay tuned for that. Before we talk about the next player, guys, I want to give a shout out to Drafters Fantasy Sports. If you use my promo code FIREDUP when signing up and depositing a minimum of $20, they will match your deposit 100% up to $100. It's a daily fantasy sports app. You can do pick'ems and best ball drafts on the NFL, MLB, NHL, and more. The NHL contests and pick'ems are not available just yet, but trust me, once they open, I will be doing live streams almost every day if I can. As of right now, you can do NFL best ball drafts, and also there's pick'ems for future. So right now, if you can see on my screen here, Patrick Mahomes, I'm going to pair his over passing yards with Jared Goff's over passing yards. I think this is a good solid bet. You can put $10 and win 30 in return. Doing these futures is fun, watching NFL and hoping that these parlays hit. So yeah, make sure you use promo code FIREDUP, and I can't wait to do live streams for these best ball drafts. Next up, let's just stick with Nashville Predators players, Gustav Nyquist. This was a guy that was a huge surprise last year, putting up 75 points in 81 games. Top line, first line power play. He had 24 power play points, but unfortunately, like I said with Evangelista, the signings of Marchessault and Stamkos is likely pushing Nyquist out of the first line power play. So I still think there's a good chance they run a first line of Forsberg, Ryan O'Reilly, and Nyquist, but I highly doubt they put Nyquist on the first line power play over Stamkos or Marchessault. So Nyquist, I think he was due for regression anyways, and now this kind of puts the nail in the coffin. So it is what it is, but yeah, wouldn't go ahead and draft Nyquist too high for this upcoming season. The next duo I want to talk about is Alex Lyon and Ville Husso, both goalies on the Detroit Red Wings. The Red Wings went out and got Cam Talbot this offseason, and he's projected to be the #1 starter. Lyon was a guy that was really good last year. Ville Husso has been good in the past, really performed poorly last season and dealt with injuries. But both of these goalies have lost value. Unless Talbot gets injured, I don't think they will be fantasy relevant. So keep that in mind, guys. Lyon is not going to have the type of season that we saw last year. Next up, we have St. Louis Blues defenseman Torrey Krug. We got the unfortunate news that he was diagnosed with pre-arthritic changes in his left ankle. He's going to be reevaluated, I believe, in 4 to 6 weeks, but they said that there's a good chance that he misses the remainder of this season. Obviously, I'm wishing Krug the best. If he doesn't have to have surgery and miss the remainder of the season and he is able to play, I still am concerned that he could deal with some flare-ups and he could be out periodically. So yeah, his fantasy hockey value has plummeted, and it's somebody that I would avoid drafting in your upcoming drafts. Next up, we have Philipp Kurashev of the Chicago Blackhawks. Last year, he was fantasy relevant. He scored 18 goals and put up 54 points in 75 games, which is a 59-point pace. Unfortunately, the Blackhawks went out and got actual top 6 players in Tyler Bertuzzi and Teuvo Teravainen, which means that it's unlikely for Kurashev to be on the first line power play and on a line with Bedard. With that being said, guys, Kurashev is not a player you are going to be drafting. He's not a player that you're going to be picking up unless you're in a super deep league, but I do not envision the same type of production that we saw from him last season. Next up, we have Brent Burns of the Carolina Hurricanes. Burns is 39 years old. He's no longer the fantasy hockey beast that we once knew and loved. And the reason he's a faller is because Shane Gostisbehere was brought in during free agency. So I don't know what Rod Brindamore was doing last season. Burns should have been taken off the first line power play. It just didn't make sense. He was not playing good on that first line power play, but I'm assuming they're going to put Gostisbehere on the first line power play and that means Burns is going to lose a lot of value in fantasy hockey. Next up, we have Charlie Lindgren, goaltender for the Washington Capitals. This guy played incredible last year. Kemper was so bad, and then Lindgren stepped up, sort of putting the Capitals on his back and taking them to the playoffs, even though they should not have been a playoff team. But look at his numbers, 2.67 goals against average and 911 save percentage. That is very good numbers. But unfortunately, the reason he's a faller on this list is because the Capitals traded for Vegas Golden Knights goaltender Logan Thompson. Thompson now on the Capitals with Lindgren. I think it's going to be a 1A, 1B situation. So both goalies are going to suffer. I just worry that Lindgren might end up being the 1B in the situation. I don't know if he's going to get 50 games again. And if you're in a points league that values volume, as most points leagues do, this will hurt Lindgren in the long term. So we'll have to see what happens with that goalie situation, but not a fan of it for both goaltenders in fantasy hockey. Next up, we have Sean Durzi of the Utah Hockey Club. I was a big fan of him last year. If you watch my videos, I thought he was going to break out, but he sort of just didn't do that good. He started off hot and then he cooled down. 41 points in 76 games, 9 goals. It's solid, but I thought there was a potential for him to put up 50 plus points. And now Utah has traded for Mikhail Sergachev, who in my opinion is better suited to run that first power play unit. So yeah, I mean, if Durzi's not on the first line power play, his fantasy relevance just goes down the toilet. So yeah, Durzi definitely lost a lot of value in fantasy hockey, and we're going to be closely monitoring what happens during training camp, preseason, and the beginning of the season to see who runs that first unit. Next, we have Chandler Stevenson of the Seattle Kraken, one of the worst signings in real life hockey. I mean, I don't understand giving Stevenson that much money with that much term, but it is what it is. Stevenson's not the best fantasy hockey player to begin with. He doesn't put up a lot of shots, hits, or blocks. I mean, last year he had 97 shots in 75 games. He was also, he got a good amount of power play time on Vegas as well on the first line power play. As you guys can see here, 2 minutes and 53 seconds of power play time per game. That's going to change. The Kraken run a very balanced offense, like I said earlier. And with that being said, I think that his power play time is going to go down. His even strength ice time is probably going to be pretty similar. It looks like he's going to be on the second line, but he's going to a team that should have a worse offense than Vegas had last year. And he's just not a good fantasy hockey player to begin with his lack of peripherals. So yeah, I think it's not the best situation for Chandler Stevenson. Not a fan of it, and not a fan of it for some other Kraken players that I'll get into in just a little bit. Next up, we have Shane Wright of the Seattle Kraken. The Stevenson signing is really bad for Wright's fantasy value, especially with the money that they gave Stevenson. Wright doesn't really have an ability to break into the top 6 at this point with their roster construction. So that means he's either going to be on the third line or the fourth line. The opportunity for power play time is not going to be there. The opportunity for even strength ice time is not going to be there. Because of that, he lost a lot of value with the signing. So a lot of people saw Wright got called up last year. He scored 4 goals in 8 games, but this was also accompanied by a 33.3% shooting percentage, which was not sustainable whatsoever. So I think Wright will be a solid fantasy hockey player in the future, but it's not going to be this season unless we saw a number of injuries happen specifically to Chandler Stevenson or someone else. Next up, we have Evander Kane of the Edmonton Oilers. He didn't have the best season last year, but he still put up 24 goals and 44 points in 77 games. That's solid. And also, if you're in a league that values shots and hits, he puts up elite numbers in those categories. So he's going to be a guy that would still have been drafted pretty high if it weren't for the signings of Victor Arvidsson and Jeff Skinner. But now, Jeff Skinner and Victor Arvidsson in, Kane is unlikely to be in the top 6. And to make matters worse, he is going to be on the LTIR to start the season. Who knows when he will be back, but even when he does come back, he's likely not going to get significant minutes. I would say less than 16 minutes of ice time per game. He doesn't get any first line power play time to begin with as well. So yeah, I mean, he'll be good in leagues that heavily value shots and hits, but he's just not going to be a guy that we're going to see score 30 goals or put up 50 plus points, in my opinion. Next, we have another Seattle Kraken player, and this was one of the biggest free agency signings this offseason, defenseman Brandon Montour. Now, Montour, he struggled last year. He was not good. The reason he's a faller is because, I mean, it's pretty obvious. He's going from one of the best offensive teams in the NHL and the Florida Panthers to the Seattle Kraken, which I mentioned earlier have a very balanced offense, which is terrible for fantasy hockey. The fact is, guys, Montour, he averaged 3 minutes and 54 seconds of power play time per game last year. he's not going to get those minutes on the Kraken unless something changes. I don't think it will. I think Bylsma, with the roster construction that they have, they're still going to run 2 units evenly. It's not going to be a dedicated first unit, so he will suffer in fantasy going to a worse offensive team. He has lost value, and not a huge fan of him going into this season. Next up, we have Vince Dunn of the Seattle Kraken. This one's pretty obvious, guys. I just talked about Brandon Montour. There's no reason they would bring him on tour for the type of money that they brought him in for to not have him run the first power play unit. So Vince Dunn, he led the Kraken in power play time last year. That will not happen this season. So less power play time, less fantasy points. I also think that Dunn is due for some regression. If you're looking at the last 2 seasons, he's had a shooting percentage of over 9%. I don't think that's sustainable for him. But yeah, not very high on him. And he definitely lost quite a bit of value with that Montour signing. The last faller we have on this list was the biggest free agency signing this offseason, and that player is Steven Stamkos, who is now on the Nashville Predators. Now, I still think Steven Stamkos is a very talented player who can score a lot of goals, but we did see a noticeable decline in terms of even strength when it comes to Steven Stamkos. He's sort of become a power play merchant. He had 81 points last year, and 40 of these points came from the man advantage. He's going from the best power play in the NHL in the Tampa Bay Lightning to the Nashville Predators. So you're going to see a decrease in power play points, and you might see him playing with players like Tommy Novak and Jonathan Marchessault. So Jonathan Marchessault is a great player, but you're going from a team where maybe you had Brandon Hagel and Cirelli on your line. Sometimes you'd be playing with Point or Kucherov, and now Tommy Novak may be centering your line. So it is what it is, guys. He still puts up a lot of shots. He's still a good goal scorer, but yes, he lost value in fantasy hockey. There's no question about that. All right, guys, that is the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. Hit that like button, subscribe if you're new to the channel, follow me on X/Twitter at FIREDUP Fantasy, join the Discord, do all that stuff, guys. I will catch you in the next one. Take care.